Okay, we'll begin as we always do with the profession of faith via the sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. This class, this session, is a takeoff from last week when we spoke about Paul going to Athens, and it's the first contact that the church had with Greek philosophy, and ultimately, historically, Greek philosophy then would come to the aid, okay, of the church for evangelization, also making arguments in defense of the faith, especially to the Gentile world, okay, whereby it was necessary to evangelize, to make the arguments to a Gentile world, okay, that depended upon a reason and appealing to reason and men as rational beings. In Paul's epistle to the Romans, he makes an argument that creation, okay, makes it manifestly clear that there is a God, and that people have no excuse, okay, for not accepting Christ or a revelation of the Old Testament. Okay, and if creation makes manifest the existence of God, then creation can make proofs or offer proofs that God in fact does exist. So that we can say that we know there is a God, but we have to believe that there's a triune God. Okay, and so the presupposition in creation and in the arguments, okay, is that man is a knower, okay, and that the world is knowable. That's the presupposition, okay, that this created world is knowable, okay, and that man, as a knower, can know this knowable, and therefore there is such a thing as knowledge. Okay, so there is such a thing as knowledge. That's the presupposition, okay, is that we can know this world, okay, and we can say definitively that I know that when I throw something up in the air, it's not going to come down. So, okay, the other thing that's based upon this also is our experience. So this what they call common sense experience, okay, that everyone accepts. So, for instance, everyone accepts that all men desire to be happy. Not everyone accepts what happiness is or how to pursue that end, but everyone understands that everyone desires to be happy, okay? So those are the kind of principles that we can know. In the proofs for the existence of God, there are 5, okay? And one of the principles in the first 3 that we will be using is a principle called reductio ad infinitum, I-N-T-U-M. And that means is reduce everything, odd is 2, to the infinite, okay? So if I say something exists, I can say all the way back without going through it specifically and particularly that there must have been a first one of these, okay? So if I say there are trees out there, then there must be at some point in time, there must have been a first tree, okay, from which all other trees then come, okay? So that's what they call the principle of reductio ad infinitum. You can't go out and count every tree and go all the way back to the first tree, but it is reasonable, okay, to assume that if there is a tree, there must have been a first tree at some point in time, okay? So given that, those are the kind of the presuppositions in these proofs for the existence of God. Okay, the first proof, okay, is cause and effect. Okay, so for every effect, there is a cause. For every effect, there is a cause. Okay, so that the child comes out of the womb, that's an effect that was caused by the 2 parents. Those 2 parents, okay, were effects of their 2 parents. Okay, and their parents, and so blah, 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 and you go all the way back and say, well, there must have been a first cause of human generation. It must have been the first cause of human generation. So you can take anything that there is, and there is an effect, there has to be a cause for something. Something caused that effect. So for every effect, there is a cause. If you go, this principle reduce everything to the infinite, that is, you go back to the beginning, okay, there has to be a first cause that was not an effect. There has to be a first cause that was not an effect. So for every effect, there is a cause, but if you go all the way back, there has to have been a first cause that was not an effect. So the first cause had to cause the first effect. because you cannot have a cause that's an effect. If you go all the way back, you'll say that, yeah, for every effect that's a cause, but that cause is an effect. If you go back to that effect and say, no, there must have been a cause for that, but yet that cause is an effect because it was caused by something else. Okay? So if you go all the way back, then there has to be something was called the first cause that was not an effect. And that's a rational argument. That's a reasonable argument. Okay? The second proof is there is the necessary and the contingent. That is, you can see effects are contingent upon a cause, right? So if it's a contingent, then the cause must be necessary to have caused that effect. Yes, no? Yeah. Okay. So in other words, you see that the baby's existence is contingent upon the parents. So it's both an effect. The parents are both an effect, and they are necessary to have that effect on the child. So the child's existence is contingent upon the necessity of their mother and father engaged in the conjugal act. Okay, and then they are effects from that, blah, blah, blah. So you go all the way back, and for every contingency, there is something that is necessary. There is something that is necessary. So your health is contingent upon the necessity of good nutrition. Okay, your health is contingent upon that. Okay, but the nutrition is also the cause that brings about the effect of good health. Yes? Okay, good. Okay, then the third one, okay, is that for every motion, there is a mover. So everything that's in motion has been moved by something other than itself. Everything that's in motion has been moved by something else. So that if you go back, there must have been, at some point in time, okay, there had to be this first mover that set everything into motion. Okay, and that first mover obviously is the first necessary, because everything is contingent upon that necessity or on that cause or on that first mover. So for every mover, for every motion there is a mover, for every contingency there's a necessity, and for every effect there is a cause. Right? That's pretty simple arguments, right? So then if you go all the way back, okay, in this reductio ad infinitum, you go all the way back, okay, and you find out there was a first mover that was not in motion. There was a first necessity that was not a contingent, and there was a first cause that was not an effect. Right? Well, obviously, if you look at that, this first necessary and this cause all have to be the same. All have to be the same. Because if it is not, then the first cause, okay, would be a contingent, and it can't be a contingent if it's a cause. Okay, it cannot be. If it's not necessary, then it was not a mover, it was a motion. So therefore, all of these, the cause, the necessity, and mover, all have to be the same, because if they weren't, there would be an effect, there would be a contingency, or there'd be a motion. Okay, so just logically, it works out that all three of these have to be the same. Okay, so they cannot be separated. Otherwise, there would not be a first cause, a first necessary, a first mover. There would be one of these effects, contingency, or put in motion. Okay, so they all have to be the same. Okay. The fourth argument, okay, is degrees of perfection. You look at in existence from our own experience, okay, we all have a sense of what, say, the perfect apple would be, or what the perfect tree would be, or what the perfect sunset would be, okay? So we all have a sense of perfection. That is, there's some things that are more perfect than others. There are some things more perfect than others. So you would argue it's, okay, what is more beautiful, a rose or a sunset? And people, the argument would be the sunset, because it has more of beauty than the rose does. This does not mean that the rose is not beautiful. It's less perfect in beauty than the sunset, only because it does not contain as much beauty, say, as the sunset does. Okay? So there are degrees of perfection. There are some things that are more perfect than the other. So we even do that when we grade exams, okay? the grade A shows it's more perfect than the grade B, and B is more perfect than the grade C. Okay. In these degrees of perfection, okay, there has to be some reference point to say that this is more perfect than another thing. Okay. So what is the perfection of health? Well, the perfection of health is not the only thing that's perfect, so there are other things that are perfect. Well, if there are other things that are perfect, then they participate, okay, in perfection itself. They are not itself, okay? So mathematics is not the totality of truth, okay? It participates in truth, but it is not the totality of truth. There are things that are beyond the thing itself that is true, which means then there must be something that is truth itself, of which all these things that are true participate in it. Because if they did not participate in it, then that particular truth would be truth itself, and nothing else would be true. But we know that that's not true, because we know that all things, there are all things that are true, in that not one thing by itself is truth itself. So there must be a thing called truth itself, okay? It's the same thing with good, okay? We know that there are things that are good, okay? They participate in the good, okay? Because health is not only true, okay, but it cannot be the good because there are other good things, okay? So there has to be, in these degrees of perfection, okay, there has to be something that is truth, something that is good. There has to be something that is beautiful, okay, whereby all things participate in the beauty. So you go back to the sunset, you say the sunset is more perfect with regard to beauty because there is more beauty in it than the rose. However, the sunset is not itself beauty because there are other beautiful things. So there must be something that is beautiful, or beauty itself, by which all these things participate. It's the same thing with the good, the same thing with truth. Because we know in our common sense experience that there are things that are true, there are things that are good, and there are things that are beautiful. But we also know that there is the perfection of truth, good, and beauty, okay? And if it is, then there has to be a perfect, of which truth itself participates, good itself participates, and beauty itself participates, okay? And that's what they call the first perfect. So we have the first cause, the first necessary, we have the first mover, okay, and then we have the first perfect, but obviously then the first perfect has to be these at the same thing at the same time, okay, because the first perfect then has truth, good, and beauty, and the cause then of beauty is this first perfect. The cause then, the necessary, okay, is this first perfect, and the one that sets that into motion, or the mover, is the first perfect. Okay, so then this first perfect then has to be included in this whole. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, and 4, they're all the same, just by argument. Okay. The fifth and final proof, okay, is it's called the teleological argument, and that just comes from the Greek word telos, and it means end, that everything in existence has a purpose. Everything has a purpose. There's nothing in life that does not have a purpose. And that's one of the ways that we know things, and we know them best by their purpose. Right? So there have been difficulties finding a cure for cancer, not because there's not a cure available. They don't know what it is. Once they find out what it is, they can get a cure. Because they don't know whether it's a virus or a bacteria. That's why they cannot find a cure for cancer. So all the research in cancer is to find out what it is. Once we find out what it is, okay, then we can find a cure, okay. So everything in existence has purpose, okay. If it has a purpose, that means it's intelligible. We can know it. That means we can know it. It's intelligible, okay, if it has purpose. So what is the purpose of that? Okay, and we say, well, what it is, trees give off oxygen. That's its purpose. Okay, and so if we have everything has purpose and it's knowable, that means it's intelligible. Okay, it must mean that there's some intelligence. Okay, that had to put that knowability or the intelligibility into it. Because the thing cannot give to itself what it does not have. If it does not have it, it must receive its perfection from a source outside itself. Okay, so if you cannot fly, it's because you do not have the capacity or the power to fly. Okay, and if you wanted to fly, you would have to receive that power to fly from a source outside of yourself. That is, you would have to have your being changed in order to fly like a bird, because your being is not meant to fly. Okay, but man, through his intelligibility, can learn how to fly. Okay, and man does learn how to fly, and therefore he can, through his knowledge, okay, aviate. Okay, so and the reason that he can do that is because if you look at birds in their flight, they're knowable, they're intelligible. We find out how they do it, and then we imitate that. Okay, so that means they're knowable. That means it's intelligible. Okay, and that's how we learn to fly. That's where we develop our technology from. We go to nature, we look at nature. How does that work? Okay, and it works this way because blah, blah, blah. Okay, so if an intelligence, okay, planted intelligibility or knowledge into all of existence, okay, then there had to be, okay, a first intelligence. There had to be an intelligence, okay, that put intelligibility or knowability into all that is. Okay, and obviously then if you look at that, then the first intelligence has to be the first perfect. It has to be the first cause, the first necessary, and the first mover. Okay, so then all five of these have to be the same thing or be the same being. Okay, so if you put all that together, okay, then what you have is, if intelligence is the first, is what puts knowability in, so that we, human beings, our knowers, can know things that exist, okay, then intelligence then has to be a person, because only persons have intelligence. Meaning by that, intelligence that you can go out and know ability. Animals have and plants have an innate intelligence that's confined to how they exist, but they don't go out and know on their own. Okay, that's input in them by nature. So only persons then, okay, have intelligence. Well, if this person is the first intelligence and he's the first perfect, he's the first mover, he's the first necessary, he's the first cause, that person, okay, is what is called God. And the reason it's called God, because the definition of God, okay, is he's all-knowing, he's all-powerful, he's all this, he's all that. And those are kind of the attributes that we give to the term God. Okay, and therefore all of these five then sum up what most people understand by God. So therefore, as St. Paul says, you go to creation, okay, and you pay attention to creation, you have to admit, okay, there is a God. So they have no reason not to know that there is a God. Okay, so everyone can know there is a God. No one can believe that there is a God, because it can be shown that there is a God. We can know that there is a God. What has to be believed, okay, is in the Old Testament, we have to believe that this God is I am who am, okay? Or in this place, it's now Christ who reveals the triune God. You have to believe in the triune God, that is one God, three divine persons, but you do not believe that there is a God. You can know that there is a God. And it's just by looking at nature, looking at creation, okay? But this little layout very quickly, okay, shows, okay, that there is a God. And that's why there is a God and why creation shows that there is a God. Pretty neat, huh? You see, you really don't have to be brilliant to get this, because it really is all common sense, even though there's fancy terms up there. Yes or no? Any questions? Okay, so that's what the importance of Paul going to Athens, okay, is because Greek philosophy then provided the means, okay, for making arguments, okay, in defense of the faith, and also to expand the faith to those who were non-Jews into the Gentile world. Okay, and that's the importance of philosophy. That's the importance of what philosophy allows you to do. This is what a philosophy allows you to do. Okay, so when it came, as I mentioned this, when it came to the Nicene Creed, why we have that and bow our heads, okay, is when we have the Arian heresy, which is a denial that Christ was fully God. Okay, he was fully man. No one had any problems with that. But whether he was fully God or not, that was challenged. Okay, and the question is he of the same substance or is he of like substance? Okay, and that's why the Greek word and the Greek philosophy, only they talked about substance. So you talk about the substance of God. What is the substance of God? He's the first cause, he's the first necessary, he's the first mover, he's the first perfect, and he is the first intelligence. Okay, that's who God is. Okay, that's who God is. Okay, and so that substance, this means that this Christ has to be of the same substance as he's fully God. Other than that, he would be like God, but not of the same substance. And no Jew would have that argument because you could not talk about God. You could not mention God's name. You could not have no theology from the Jews. And so theology in Christianity developed, okay, because of Greek philosophy. That's what theology comes from. And so theology, okay, is the study of God. And that's what philosophy allows you to do, to study God. That is study through his characteristics, his qualities, etc. And that's the great gift of Greek philosophy to the church. So when people say, what has Athens got to do with Jerusalem? Everything. The church would not be in a position that it is today, 2,000 years later, literally, if it wasn't for this Greek philosophy able to offer the arguments in defense of the faith or the truths of the faith. Okay, and again, we almost lost all of the faith in that Arian heresy over this one little I here, one little iota. Right, would have changed all of Christianity. It would never be the same as we are today. So it makes a difference whether we have arguments in defense of the faith or not. And philosophy is the tool by which we can do that. And philosophy then, there is such a thing as Christian philosophy, and what we call that is theology. Right? One of the problems with seminary training today is seminarians used to have to do 4 years of philosophy and 4 years of theology. They would spend 8 years. And that's why the priests in the old day, they knew their stuff. Today, they don't do that. And that's why younger priests, after the council, when they wash down the seminary training, they really do not, not that they're dumb bells, okay, they just have a lousy education. That is, they really don't know how to argue in defense of the faith. And so what they do is they try to appeal to emotions, but emotions will not satisfy, get you by for a while, but pretty soon as rational beings, we want to know why. Why do we believe this? Okay. And can you give me some evidence why so the faith then has to be reasonable because we are rational beings, we are knowers. So I not only want to know what's in the world, I want to know what's in the faith. I want to give me arguments in defense of that faith. And that was the early church fathers. That's what they did. They provided all the arguments, okay, because they were all Greek educated, okay. The Basils and the Augustines and all those early fathers that are the great doctors of the church and fathers of the church, they laid out, okay, the whole defense of the faith and articulating the faith because they had access to philosophy. So philosophy is no minor matter. Paul going to Athens is no minor matter. And that's why I try to make that point last week when we were doing the section on from the Acts of the Apostles. That's what it's all about. Okay, when you look at Paul going to Athens, that's what it's all about ultimately. Okay, so we can rest secure that if you have any difficulties in terms of articulating your faith or whatever, okay, it's going to come ultimately from there in terms of presenting the arguments. The substance comes from faith, but the arguments come from reason. Okay, and the reason that we have a terrific catechism, okay, in the year of 2000, right, is that all of this has been developed, okay, and that catechism is probably the neatest thing walking around because every single argument, okay, for and against, okay, is contained in that catechism. Catechism is really the fruit of all of this for 2,000 years. And that's why no one, and just as St. Paul says, no one has any excuse not to know God through creation. Today, no one has no excuse not to know the God of Revelation, okay, because all the arguments have been laid out. And we're very, very fortunate that the church, okay, as a mother, has developed that. And that's a great gift that we have. So even though you may not be able to lay out the proofs of the existence of God, I can sit here and 20, 25 minutes lay it out for you, and bingo, you know deep down that there is a God, even though you may not be able to lay out the arguments. Right? Yeah. Okay? In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.